New Mexico Territory, 1891. In Bitter Springs, the cowboys got the sunlight. That was how the town had arranged itself. Men who rode in from the range were greeted before their horses stopped moving. Women stepped to porches. Boys ran after them through the dust. Old men at the mercantile lifted their chins because a rider coming in with his hat low and his coat powdered white always looked like the beginning of trouble or the end of it. But every saddle those men sat in had passed through one narrow shop at the east end of town. Every cinch, every stirrup leather, every cracked trace, every harness strap that kept a team from bolting into disaster had been cut, punched, oiled, and stitched by a man most people noticed only when something broke. His name was Noah Keene. He was 22 years old, and by the end of that winter, one 2-inch strip of leather would make Bitter Springs admit what Lydia Marlow had seen first. The riders looked brave. Noah made bravery possible. He opened Keene's saddlery before sunrise every morning except Sunday, and most Sundays too if a ranch hand came pounding on the door with a snapped breast collar and a long ride ahead. The shop smelled of neat's foot oil, pine boards, hot dust, and hides that had crossed too much country before they ever reached his bench. Good leather was not cheap in the territory. It came by rail as far as Las Cruces, then by wagon over roads that turned to powder in summer and paste in winter. Brass buckles cost more than they should. Thread had to be bought in spools and guarded like coffee. Noah knew the price of every inch. He also knew how often he would not charge it. If a widow needed a bridle mended, he took eggs instead of coins. If a farmer's mule harness failed 2 days before planting, Noah worked late and wrote the bill in pencil, because pencil could be rubbed away when a man looked ashamed. Nobody called this generosity. They called it Noah being Noah. That was how people hide their gratitude when they are used to receiving it. He had learned the trade from his mother's brother, Caleb, who taught him that a bad stitch always told the truth eventually. Leather remembers, Caleb used to say. A man can lie about what he pulled. A strap will not. Caleb was dead by then, taken by fever the year before Lydia arrived, leaving Noah the tools, the lease, a wall of unfinished orders, and one rule burned deeper than any brand. Do the hidden work right. Because hidden work is the work people trust without looking. Noah had not expected anyone to look. Then Lydia Marlow came to Bitter Springs in September. She stepped down from the stage with one carpet bag, 2 crates of school books, and the expression of a woman deciding whether the town in front of her was going to disappoint her. Noah was across the road repairing a child's riding strap for the mercantile owner. She noticed the saloon first, then the church, then the schoolhouse with its crooked bell frame and sun-split door, then him. Not a glance, not that polite passing inventory strangers give each other. She looked straight at his hands, at the needle, at the strap, at the way he tied off the stitch and tested it twice before handing it back. He looked away first. He told himself it was because the light was in his eyes. It was not. 3 weeks later, Lydia came to the saddlery carrying the schoolhouse bell strap. It was old, stiff, cracked at the hole, and holding together by stubbornness more than strength. She held it as if it were evidence. Noah was bent over a stock saddle when she paused in the doorway. Most people paused there. Not because of heat like at a forge, but because of the quiet. Keene saddlery did not roar. It waited. The walls were lined with hanging bridles, coiled reins, saddle trees, awls, knives, needles, buckles, and strips of leather in different browns, each one with a future only Noah could see. He finished pulling the stitch through before he looked up. "Miss Marlow," he said. She looked surprised. "In Bitter Springs," he added. "A new teacher is news before the stage dust settles." She smiled at that and held up the strap. "The bell nearly came down on a boy named Peter Ellis." Noah took it and bent the leather carefully. It cracked farther under his thumb. "That strap is finished." "I thought it could be repaired." "The strap can be patched," he said, "but the frame above it is chewing through leather. You patch this, and it breaks again before Christmas." She studied him. No one mentioned the frame. No one had to hang under it every morning. He said it plainly, not with pride. That was the first thing she noticed about him after his hands. He did not perform knowledge. He simply used it. "How long?" she asked. "Friday." She came back Friday. The bell strap was new. The holes were reinforced. The old frame had been planed down smooth where it had been cutting the leather. A small iron washer had been added where no one would see it. Lydia ran her thumb over the work. "You fixed the frame." "It was the problem." "I brought the strap." "You brought the symptom." That should have ended it. It did not. The next week she returned with a torn book satchel. The week after that, a loose hinge from a school desk. The week after that, a cracked slate frame that had nothing to do with saddles and very little to do with his trade. Noah fixed it anyway. By October, Lydia had no broken thing at all. She came in with a notebook and said she was preparing a lesson on frontier trades and needed to understand what a saddlemaker did. Noah, who had never been studied by anyone with green eyes and ink on her fingers, said, "There is not much to it." Then he spent the next hour proving himself wrong. He showed her how wet leather stretched differently than dry leather, how a cinch ring could look sound and fail under a twist, how a stitch line had to be set back far enough from the edge or the whole thing would tear under strain, how a saddle was not one object, but a dozen small agreements holding together. Lydia wrote nothing after the first 10 minutes. Noah did not notice. He was too busy trying not to notice her. By the end of October, she had stopped pretending the visits were for lessons. By the end of October, so had he. But Bitter Springs had already chosen a different man for her. His name was Cole Ransom. Cole was 25, handsome in the easy public way that required no explanation, and known from one end of Doña Ana County to the other for riding a bad horse until the horse gave up being bad. He had a laugh that filled rooms. He bought drinks without counting coins. He remembered names, tipped his hat to old women, and could tell a range story so well that men who had been there began to enjoy it more in his version. He was not cruel. That made him harder to refuse. He first called on Lydia at the schoolhouse with a bouquet wrapped in paper from the mercantile. Not wildflowers gathered casually, but ordered flowers from the rail town, kept damp in cloth, paid for in advance. The town approved before Lydia had even answered. "Cole Ransom is steady," Mrs. Delaney said from behind the mercantile counter the next morning. "Good horse, good pay, good prospects. And he has been asking after you." Lydia bought chalk and lamp oil. That is kind of him. Mrs. Delaney leaned forward. He will ask you to the winter dance. Lydia placed the coins on the counter. I expect he might. And you will say yes. Lydia looked across the street. Noah was outside his shop, holding a saddle upside down in his lap, checking the underside with the attention of a doctor listening to a chest. I said he might ask, Lydia said. Mrs. Delaney followed her gaze and frowned, as if the arithmetic had gone bad. That boy works too much to court anybody. Lydia did not answer. Noah looked up at that exact moment. Not long, just long enough to make her forget why she had come to the mercantile. What Lydia began to understand that month was not romance. It was cost. A cowboy's work was visible. The lariat, the horse, the dust, the bruise, the story afterward. The risk presented itself with a hat and a spur. Noah's work hid inside things that did not fail. That made it harder to see. Then she started seeing it everywhere. She saw the cracked skin at the sides of his fingers, where waxed thread burned through a pull. She saw the groove worn into his left thumb from years of guiding leather under the awl. She saw him blink away headaches when he had been too long over close work in lamplight. She saw him refuse extra money from a freight driver, then spend that same money on better thread because the driver's team crossed rough country. She learned that he had begun apprenticing at 12, that Caleb had made him take apart his first saddle 3 times because one hidden stitch was crooked, that Noah rose before dawn not because he loved discipline, but because a man could finish small kindnesses before anyone arrived to make him explain them. The first of those kindnesses, she discovered, was for a boy named Peter Ellis. Peter had told the school that no horse could ever be made small enough to fit in his pocket unless it was magic. Noah heard about it when Lydia mentioned the argument by accident. 2 weeks later, she came into the shop earlier than usual and found him covering something on the bench. Not fast enough. She saw a little saddle, no longer than her palm, cut from scrap leather, with tiny stirrups made from bent wire and a girth strap finer than ribbon. For Peter, she said. Noah kept his eyes on the bench. He said pocket horses were impossible. I thought he ought to have the necessary equipment ready. She laughed. He looked up then, and the laugh caught him somewhere he had no defense. You were going to leave it without a note, she said. It is better if he thinks the world did it. Lydia looked at him for a long moment, at the oil lamp, at the scraps saved carefully in a tin, at the man who made children believe impossible things quietly before breakfast and hoped no one would notice. That was when she stopped thinking of him as shy. Shy was too small a word. Noah Keene had trained himself to take up less space than his work. Cole Ransom asked Lydia to the winter dance in early December. He came after school, holding another paper-wrapped bouquet, and asked with the bright certainty of a man who had rarely been told no in public. Lydia said she would think on it. That was not the answer Bitter Springs expected. It was also not the answer Cole expected, though he received it well because he had manners. When he left, Lydia did not go home. She crossed directly to Keene's saddlery, not slowly, not by accident, directly. Noah was repairing a pair of cracked saddle skirts, his sleeves rolled to the elbow, lamplight already on, though it was barely late afternoon. He looked up when she entered. No broken satchel today? No. She stood beside the bench. Cole Ransom asked me to the dance. Noah's hand stopped in the middle of drawing thread, only for a second, then it moved again. He is a good man. So everyone keeps telling me. They are right. The thread came through with a sharp little sound. You should go, he said. His voice was steady. His fingers missed the next hole. Lydia saw it. That was the trouble with learning a man's work. You learned when his hands were telling the truth, his mouth would not. Noah? He did not look up. If you think saying that is kindness, you are mistaken. His jaw tightened. It is not my place to say anything else. Who told you that? He pulled the stitch through. No one had to. There it was. Not humility. A door he had built inside himself and mistaken for good manners. Lydia waited for him to open it. He did not. So she left before her hurt could become anger. Behind her, in the narrow shop, Noah kept sewing until the same line of stitches was so tight he had to cut it out and do it over. He went to the winter dance. Noah himself could not have explained why. He owned one good shirt. He washed his hands twice, though the dye and oil in the cracks of his skin never fully left. He stood outside the church hall for almost 10 minutes, listening to the fiddle before he stepped in. Inside, Bitter Springs was bright with lamps, cedar garland, polished boots, and women's dresses brought out of trunks for the only kind of evening that made a hard town soften. Cole Ransom was already dancing with Lydia. Of course he was. He looked exactly as the town wanted him to look. Tall, easy, smiling. The correct shape of a story. Lydia danced well. Cole danced better. People watched them with open satisfaction, as if the ending had arrived early and everyone could stop worrying about it. Noah stayed at the edge of the lamplight with his hat in both hands. He had meant only to see. That was foolish. Seeing was worse. Lydia turned once in the dance, and her eyes found him. Everything in her face changed. Not dramatically. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for him. The dance ended. Cole said something that made the nearest women laugh. Lydia smiled, thanked him, and walked away from the center of the room. She walked past the punch table, past Mrs. Delaney, past the open door where cold air moved in, all the way to Noah. "You came," she said. "I did." His voice had gone careful again. His hands were bending the brim of his hat. "Dance with me." He looked toward Cole. "Miss Marlow." "Lydia," she said. "My name is Lydia, and I've spent 2 months sitting in your shop while you pretend not to put the second chair where I like it." That hit him harder than it should have. She held out her hand. "Dance with me, Noah." He put his hat down. He was not a good dancer. He counted under his breath. He apologized once before stepping anywhere near her feet. He moved like a man trying to repair something fragile without knowing where the break was. Lydia did not laugh. Cole watched from across the hall. So did half the town. Noah noticed all of them and wished he were invisible. Lydia noticed only him. When the music ended, he released her hand too quickly. She let him, but before she turned away, she said very quietly, "I do not need the whole room to agree with me." Then she went back into the light, and Noah stood at the edge of it, with the first dangerous hope of his life opening in his chest. The next week, he tried to kill it. Hope, he had learned, was expensive. It asked a man to imagine a future and then made him pay for every inch of that picture. Noah had pictures now. Lydia at the second chair, Lydia's books on his counter, Lydia walking beside him in town without caring who tilted their head. Then the other pictures came. The shop roof leaking in March, accounts unpaid, his hands too stiff some winter morning to hold the needle cleanly. The small back room where he slept, with flour sacks folded under the window to stop the draft. Lydia Marlow had been to normal school in St. Louis. She owned books with Latin written in the margins. She knew poems and geography, and how to hold a room of 30 children with one raised eyebrow. Noah knew leather, debt, and the exact sound a stitch made when it's seated properly. So when Cole came to the shop 2 days later to pick up a repaired saddle, Noah did what wounded men often do. He called it wisdom. Cole paid him and lingered near the doorway. "I expect I will ask Miss Marlow properly before Christmas," Cole said. "Thought you ought to know. You two have become friendly." Noah set the coins on the bench. "She deserves to be asked properly." Cole smiled, not unkindly. "That she does." After he left, Noah stood with one hand on the saddle horn and felt something inside him close. By Tuesday, he had moved the second chair back against the wall. Lydia saw it as soon as she entered. There were no greetings that morning. She looked at the chair, then at him. "No," Noah swallowed. "You do not know what I was going to say." "I know exactly what you were going to say." He lowered his eyes to the leather in front of him. "I have work." "You always have work." That is part of the problem. Lydia stepped farther inside. The shop was dim behind her, with cold sunlight at her back and dust hanging in the air like a verdict. "You are about to decide what my life is allowed to include," she said. "And you are going to call it consideration." His face changed because she had found the seam. "I cannot give you what he can." "What do you think I asked you for?" He had no answer. She waited. Still no answer. At last, she said, "You fix the part that is actually broken. You taught me that." Then she left. Noah sat down after she was gone, not because he wanted to, because his knees had forgotten their work. 3 days before Christmas, rain came down hard over the Black Range and ran off the hills in brown ropes. By noon, the arroyo north of town was swollen. By 2, the freight road had turned dangerous. By 3, a supply wagon from the railhead tried to cross anyway because flour was short and the driver had been paid to make Bitter Springs before dark. Halfway through the crossing, the lead team spooked. One wheel dropped into a cut the water had hidden. The wagon lurched sideways. A trace chain snapped. Then the right lead horse went down in the mud, trapped under the tongue and the twisted harness. Thrashing so hard, the other 3 horses nearly tore themselves apart, trying to pull free. The shouting reached town before the details did. Cole Ransom was first to the crossing. That surprised no one. He rode down into the mud with a rope and all the courage Bitter Springs expected from him. He knew horses. He knew panic. He tried to get the lead animal's head up and turn the team enough to release the pressure. It was the right instinct. It was not enough. The more he pulled, the harder the harness locked. Men shouted from the bank. The driver cursed. The trapped horse kicked once, weakly now, and the sound changed the air around them. Noah heard it from his shop. Not the whole story, just one sentence shouted by a boy running past.
"Team's down at the North Crossing!"
Noah grabbed a knife, 2 straps, a coil of rawhide lace, and the short pry hook he used for saddle trees. Then he ran. By the time he reached the arroyo, Cole was knee-deep in water and mud, rope tight in both hands. His face was set with effort. The horse's eyes were rolling white. The wagon tongue had pinned the right side of the harness under a twist of wood and chain. Noah did not shout at Cole. He did not take over the way proud men take over. He slid down the bank and went to the harness. Cole saw him. "Keene, stay back. He'll kick your head in." "He will if we keep pulling the wrong way." Noah dropped to one knee in the mud. He saw the actual problem in less than 10 seconds. The breast strap had rolled. The broken trace chain had jammed between the tongue iron and the single tree. Every pull tightened the knot. The horse was not stuck by weight. It was being held by design. Bad design now. He needed slack. "Hold his head steady," Noah said. Cole stared at him. "Do it," Noah snapped. Cole did. That, later, was one of the things people remembered. Not only what Noah knew, but that Cole listened when it mattered. Noah slid one arm under the muddy leather. The horse jerked. A hoof struck the water inches from his ribs. Lydia arrived at the bank then, breathless, hair damp from rain, one hand at her mouth. She saw Noah under the wagon tongue. She did not call his name. Some fears are too large for sound. Noah set the pry hook beneath the jammed iron and leaned his weight into it. Nothing. The current pushed at his legs. Mud sucked at his boot. The horse trembled. He shifted lower, almost under the animal now, and set the hook again. "Cole," he said, "when it lifts, give me slack." Cole nodded. Noah pulled. The jam moved. Not enough. His left hand slipped. The iron tore skin from his palm through the glove. He felt it. He put it away. Pain could wait. Horses could not. The third time, the jam lifted. "Now!" Cole gave slack. Noah cut the rolled strap with one hard draw of his knife, shoved the broken trace free, and slapped the horse's shoulder. The animal surged forward. The team lurched, scattered, found footing. Men on the bank grabbed the driver. Someone caught the loose rein. Cole fell backward into the mud and came up laughing once, sharp and exhausted. Noah stayed where he was for 1 second longer than he should have. Then he climbed out of the arroyo and sat on a rock, because there was no dignity left to preserve. His hands were bleeding. The left palm was torn. The right had a deep rope burn where rawhide lace had dragged across it. Mud and rainwater ran down his sleeves. Bitter springs gathered around the saved team. Lydia came through them as if they were fence rails. She knelt in front of Noah and took his hands before he could hide them. He looked at her. "I know what you were thinking." Her eyes lifted to his. "No," he said, and the words came out rougher than he meant. "I know what I was thinking." She held his injured hands in both of hers. The rain hit her shoulders. Behind them, men were talking too loudly because they had come close to seeing a valuable animal die and wanted ordinary sound back in the world. Noah said, "I was wrong." Lydia did not rescue him from the sentence. She let him finish it. "I thought all I had was a little shop and sore hands and bills I could not always pay. I thought that was what I would be asking you to share. And now? He looked toward the wagon, the horses, Cole standing with mud to his waist, the town staring at the crossing, as if the facts had rearranged themselves in public. Now I think maybe I have spent my life learning how to hold things together. Lydia's grip tightened. That is what I have been trying to tell you. Cole came to the saddlery the next morning. Noah was working with both hands wrapped, badly, but working. Cole stood in the doorway and looked at the shop differently than he ever had before. Not as a place to fetch repaired gear, as a place where trouble had been prevented for years without becoming a story. You should be resting, Cole said. So should your horse. Cole smiled faintly. He is. He stepped inside and ran his fingers over a row of repaired bridles. I am not asking her. Noah looked up. You do not have to say that to me. I am saying it because it is true. Cole picked up a saddle girth from the bench. It was one Noah had remade the week before, doubled at the stress points, plain and strong. I thought she needed convincing, Cole said. I thought if I was patient, she would see what the town saw. He set the girth down carefully. She did see it. That was the trouble. She saw all of us. Then, she saw you. Noah said nothing. Cole looked toward the north road, where the rain had cleared and the mud was beginning to shine in the morning sun. Yesterday, I was pulling at the horse. You looked at the harness. That is the difference, I expect. He put on his hat. She has been waiting on you longer than a woman should have to wait on a man who knows how to fix things. At the door he paused. And Keene? Noah met his eyes. I do not like losing, Cole said. But I can stand losing to the truth. Then he walked out. Noah sat very still after that. He looked at the second chair, the one he had moved back to the wall, the one Lydia had seen, the one that made him ashamed now, not because he had wanted her there, but because he had pretended the wanting was less honest than fear. By afternoon he closed the shop. In all the years Bitter Springs had known him, almost nobody had seen Keene's saddlery closed in daylight. Mrs. Delaney saw the sign and told 3 people before he reached the schoolhouse. Noah did not know that. He was too busy trying to hold his hat with bandaged hands. The Lydia opened the schoolhouse door after the children had gone. She saw the bandages, then his face. Come in. He stepped inside. The room smelled of chalk, damp wool, and cold stove ash. Small desks stood in rows. A map of the territory hung near the blackboard. On the shelf by the window were the books she had brought from St. Louis, and the borrowed ones she had mended with glue that Noah pretended not to notice. He stood in the middle of the room, hat against his chest. I have been thinking about the hidden stitch, he said. Lydia's expression softened, but she stayed quiet. He needed the quiet. My uncle used to say the stitch no one sees is the one that decides whether the saddle holds. I always thought that meant the work mattered, and the worker did not. His throat moved. I was wrong about that. Lydia's eyes shone, but she did not interrupt. I fixed Mrs. Vale's harness and let her pay in onions. I made Peter's little saddle. I planed the bell frame because the strap was never the real problem. I do those things because they need doing. He looked down at his bandaged hands. but I have been using that as a place to hide." He looked up. "I am not asking you to choose less." Lydia stood very still. "I am asking whether you could choose this. A shop that smells like oil. A man who will come home with sore hands. Work that does not always pay what it costs. A life that may look small to people who measure wrong." His voice steadied. "But it would be honest. And it would be yours to choose. Not mine to refuse for you." Lydia crossed the schoolroom slowly. "Noah Keene," she said, "I chose it before you found the courage to offer it." He breathed once, almost a laugh and almost a hurt. "I know that now." "No," she said, "you are learning it now." Then she took his face in her hands, careful of his bandages only because she had to be. He kissed her as if he had spent months sewing himself shut and had finally cut the thread. Not politely, not in apology, with the whole truth of him at once. Lydia kissed him back with the certainty of a woman who had not mistaken kindness for weakness, quiet for emptiness, or labor for lack. Outside, Bitter Springs continued being Bitter Springs. Horses passed, a wagon rattled. Somewhere, a man laughed too loudly outside the saloon. Inside the schoolhouse, the story changed without asking the town's permission. Peter Ellis found the tiny saddle on Christmas morning. It sat on the porch beside the little wooden horse his father had carved years earlier. There was no note, no ribbon, no claim of credit. Lydia and Noah stood at the end of the lane where the mesquite brush hid them from the house. Peter came out in his nightshirt, barefoot and shivering, and stopped dead. He picked up the saddle with both hands. For a moment he only stared at it. A boy who had argued that pocket horses were impossible had just received proof that the world was more generous than his logic. Then he shouted for his mother and ran inside. Lydia looked at Noah. "He will know." "No, he will not." "He will. Children always know more than men think." Noah considered this. "Maybe. Does that trouble you?" He looked at the small porch, the open door, the house full of Christmas noise. "No," he said. "It holds either way." She slipped her hand into the bend of his arm because his palms were still healing. He let her. January came cold and bright. Lydia stopped inventing reasons to visit the saddlery and began arriving before school with 2 cups of coffee wrapped in cloth to keep them warm. Noah stopped pretending the second chair was accidental and set it near the stove every morning. Bitter Springs adjusted in stages. Mrs. Delaney acted surprised for 3 days and then claimed she had suspected it all along. Cole Ransom remained gracious, which made people admire him more and annoyed him less than he expected. Peter Ellis told every child at school that Mr. Keene could make anything real if you asked before breakfast. Noah denied this. No one believed him. By February, the saddlery was the same place it had always been. Awls on the bench, thread in tins, harness hooks along the wall, orders stacked higher than comfort allowed. The roof still needed patching, leather still cost too much. Noah's hands still hurt when the weather changed. But at 7 each morning, there was coffee on the bench. There was Lydia in the second chair, reading lessons aloud while he worked. There was a silence between them that did not ask to be filled, because it was not empty. One morning she watched him bend over a small piece of leather and cover it with his hand when she came close. She smiled, but did not ask. Some gifts deserved to arrive from the world. Some stitches deserved to stay hidden until they held. Bitter springs kept cheering the riders. That did not change. Cowboys still came in from the range with dust on their coats and stories ready. Boys still followed them down the street. Women still watched from porches. The saloon still brightened when spurs hit the boards. But after the winter of the North Crossing, a few more people looked east before their cinch straps wore through. A few more bills were paid on time. A few more men checked the underside of the saddle before praising the ride. Not enough to turn Noah into a legend. That would have embarrassed him anyway. Enough. Enough for the town to understand that the visible man is not always the necessary one. Noah Keene had not won Lydia by outshining a cowboy. He had won nothing that way. He had held a bell above schoolchildren because he saw the frame cutting the strap. He had made a small saddle from scraps because a boy needed proof that impossible things could be prepared for. He had gone down into rainwater and mud with a knife and a pry hook because everyone was pulling at the horse and no one was looking at the harness. He had spent his life seeing the stress point, the weak seam, the hidden stitch. And Lydia Marlow had done the rarest thing a person can do in a town that worships sunlight. She looked where no one was looking. She saw the hands that held the world together. And when the whole town expected her to choose the man in the saddle, she chose the man who made sure the saddle held.